If you haven't been here the last couple weeks, we are in a series right now where we're talking about why Jesus is the one to follow in your life. And the way we started this series is kind of explaining to you why Jesus is worthy of your following. And we looked at how he only wants what's best for you. We also talked about how he gives us a perfect template to navigate our life with. And we also talked about how he has the knowledge and the wisdom of the Creator. And so that makes him worthy of you following him. Now, what we're doing tonight, the next several weeks is we're looking at different aspects of his character and his actions that kind of provide us a roadmap to follow for our own lives. The reason for this series is because we are all impacted by many different influences in our lives. Some impact us for positive, some for negative, some influence us for good, and some influence us for bad. And no matter what your experiences have been in this life, there's only one perfect example that has ever existed that is truly worthy of your following, and that you know will never lead you astray or put you on the wrong path, and his name is Jesus Christ. And so that's what we're trying to point us to and try to follow him. Today, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at how Jesus loved people, and so that we can learn to truly love people as well. Because one of the things you hear all the time, especially as we go through the things we're going through now, is we hear this concept of if people just loved each other, it would solve all the issues of the world. Okay? But the thing is, you have to know what actual godly love is that God speaks about. Now, here's the thing. We are commanded by Jesus, as Christians, as followers of his, that we must love our neighbor on equal scale of us loving God. Okay? They are equals. In Mark chapter 12, this is Jesus. He says this: you must love your Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind, and with all of your strength. And the second is what? Equally. Okay? So equal with loving God with everything you have is love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? So that's what we see there is our call to love others is the same call we have, equal weight to actually loving God. Now, here's the thing with that, is we have to understand what that truly means. It's vital for us to understand what true love is. Otherwise, we can actually deceive ourselves into thinking we are loving others when in reality we are harming them. Okay? And that's not a good place to be. But this is what Satan's game has always been. To take something that God created for good, kind of distort it, and then get us to take that distortion and call that good. That's how he works in our lives. In John 8:44, we read this about Satan. It says, I put in parentheses so you know, Satan was a murderer from the beginning. He has always hated the truth because there is no truth in him. When he lies, it is consistent with his character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Now, if you go back to Genesis 3, from the very beginning, God creates a perfect creation, all right? And we see in chapter 3, you have the whole fall scenario. And with the fall scenario, it says this in chapter 3, verse 1, the serpent was the shrewdest of all the wild animals the Lord God had made. So the serpent here is a reference to Satan. It says, one day he asked the woman, did God really say you must not eat fruit from any of the trees in the garden? Now, if you read the whole text, you know God didn't say you can't eat from any of the trees. He said you just can't eat from the one. You can have the rest of them. So from the very beginning, Satan's a manipulator. Satan is a distorter to get you to distort God's word and make a distortion to it and manipulate you to go what the distortion is true and what God said isn't. And so if you read that account, he continues to kind of lie and manipulate Eve to the point where she goes, you know what? I should eat from that tree that God told me not to eat from. And that would actually be a good thing and it would benefit us. And now we know that leads to everything else and all the chaos that we have in the world and the consequences from that original sin that now plays out in all of us for all time. All right? So with that being known, it is very important for us to know what words and concepts mean, because our culture today has distorted most of the meanings and most of the concepts that we talk about on a regular basis in order to confuse us and manipulate us. So what we have to do here at the start of today is this: define what love for others actually means. Because everybody can use the same word, and we can have 50 different meanings of what that is. Are we agreed on that? Like, if I went even through here a Christian group that primarily is Christians here and asked you define love, I might get 30 different definitions. And if I go go to the world, I'm going to get 130 more different ones that are unique to different people. So we have to define what is love. So that way we're on the same page with Jesus, and we are actually loving people the way God commanded us to love people. So to start off defining the word love, here's what we have to do. We have to look at biblical text. We have to look at the example set by Jesus, not our own personal opinions or our feelings about it, because our feelings and our opinions are irrelevant, because God is the one that tells us to love. Therefore, he is the one that gets to define what love is. He defines what his words mean. He defines what his concepts mean. We do not get that privilege. We are the creation. He is the creator. So let me define what love is at its core. It is this. Love points people away from sin and evil in their lives, and it points them towards righteousness. Okay? That is the definition of love. Love points people away from sin and evil in their lives, and it points them towards righteousness. It is important that we understand all sin is ultimately destructive to our lives and other people's lives. In Romans 6:23 it says, "For the wages of sin is death." Okay? So affirming sin, enabling sin in others is not loving another person. It tells us in John 10:10, the thief, again a reference to Satan, Satan's purpose is to steal, kill, and destroy. By distorting truth, getting you to believe the distortion and running with it, and then he can accomplish his desire. On the other hand, all righteousness ultimately leads to benefits to our lives. John 10:10, the second part of that verse says, my purpose, so Jesus is saying, my purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. Therefore, affirming righteous living, enabling righteous living in other people's lives is actually loving another person. Now, that's what true godly love is in definition form. What we have to do now is talk about practically how do we live that out day in and day out to the people we are surrounded by. So how do we actually love people, not just have a definition of what it is? Now, the way that is done is this. It's through providing grace and then offering truth to non-believers. We'll handle believers later on at a different date down the road here, but to non-believers, the way we practically live out love to them is we provide grace, then we offer them truth. John 1:14, it says this, and the Word, so this word here is actually referencing again Jesus, okay? So, and Jesus became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as the only Son from the Father, full of what? Grace and truth. That's what Jesus was full of, grace and truth. So we need to take that and go, that's the example he set for us. You cannot love by only providing grace. If all you do is provide grace to people and think that's loving, it's enablement. Okay? That is not loving them. At the same time, you cannot just love people by providing truth to them. Because the best way I describe just providing truth without grace is abuse. Because all you do is beat people down and you make them feel demoralized and beat them up for who they are or what they've done that's not right in God's eyes, but you never provided them grace. So just providing grace enables, but just providing truth abuses people. The order must be grace, then truth. That's the example of Jesus, okay? The two go hand in hand in order to truly practice love and actually benefit other people eternally. That was a love that we are commanded to practice in our life day in and day out. Anything else from that is a distortion and it's a counterfeit. All right? So when I talk about grace and truth, what I mean by this, and that what you see this with Jesus, except what I'd say with Jesus, and we're going to see some examples, he was much more efficient than any of us can be because he was perfect. Okay? And we're all flawed. But what you see with Jesus when I say grace then truth is this. Grace is not looking at someone's past or even their present and judging them on it. Okay? Grace is I'm going to forget about that stuff. I can define you by that stuff. And I'm just going to see you for who you are and have interaction with you. So you lead with that. And then eventually as you build that relationship, you can now talk about truth. Now you can enter in what truth is, which is pointing people away from sin and evil in their lives and pointing them to righteousness. All right? So it starts with grace, you lead with it, eventually you get the truth. That is truly loving people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 3 examples, because this whole series is about following Jesus and his example. I'm going to give you 3 biblical examples of Jesus doing just this in his life that shows us a template for us to follow in our lives. So here they are. The first one comes from John chapter 8, and it's a woman, the way you see it described in your Bible, is a woman caught in adultery. So a little background on what's happened here, up to the point I'm going to read a couple scriptures out of that whole section. There is a bunch of religious leaders who hate Jesus at this point. They want Jesus gone. They want his voice eliminated. If it means killing him or whatever they have to do, they're going to do it. Right now, they're just trying to discredit his teaching. So what they do is they go find a woman that they know is committing adultery, which means most scholars interpret that she's probably a prostitute. So they knew where she would be, at what time, and she would be with someone that's not her husband, and she'd be committing adultery. So they go find this woman in the act of adultery. They pull her out of that situation, and they drag her out into the street where Jesus is. And they get ready to stone her, because the Jewish law, to the Jewish people, the Old Testament law, to them, the consequence of adultery was stoning. Okay? So they pull her out in front of Jesus, and they go, what should we do with her? We need to stone her, okay? And leading up to this, what you see is, when they say that to him, it says Jesus, in this situation, says he gets down, and we don't get what he writes, but it says he gets down on the ground, and he starts writing in the dirt. Doesn't say what he's writing, but he starts writing in the dirt. And it says, as he's writing in the dirt, all of the people who are accusing her, these religious leaders, one by one, start leaving the scene. Now, my assumption with that would be, he starts writing sins in the dirt that he knows they know describes them. Because why else would they sit there and when they see him writing in there be like, yeah, I'm out of here. Okay? But if he's writing your sin, or he's like, writes the name of a woman one of the Pharisees is having an affair with, and you see that, you'd be like, yeah, I'm out of here before he writes more about me. That's not talking about me, and he's gone. So it says all of them over this period of time, as Jesus writes in the dirt, they all leave, and it says it starts with the oldest to the youngest. And the oldest ones leave, and then to the youngest. And this is where he picks up in verse 10. It says, Jesus stood up and said to her, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? She said, no one, Lord. And Jesus said, neither do I condemn you. So Jesus runs them all off. Nobody's left but her and him. And then he says, hey, where's your accusers? Who are the people who are trying to condemn you? And she's like, there's nobody left. No one's accusing me. And he's like, I don't accuse you either. I'm not here to beat you up. I'm not here to call you out for what you've done. Okay? Beautiful story, right? Beautiful. That's like amazing. But there's one more verse. The last part of verse 11 there. It says this. Go, and from now on, what? Sin no more. He gives grace up front. Beautiful thing. Gets this woman out of being killed. Makes everyone flee so they can't accuse her. And he says, and I'm not accusing you either. I love you. But then he tells her, but hey, you got to make some changes. Go and sin no more. Like, you've got to do something different. This isn't turning out well for you. Go and sin no more. So you see grace, then followed by truth, where he's pointing her away from evil and sin in her life and pointing her to righteousness and going, go and sin no more. Live a righteous life moving forward from here. Don't care what you've done, but you do need to make some changes. Okay? Next one you find, Matthew chapter 9. We see this one often in scriptures, and people talk about this one a lot. Jesus met and sat and ate and communicated and hung out with people who were moral disasters by the world standards, especially in the Jewish regions. They would look at these people and go, these are moral disasters. They're either tax collectors who are working for the Romans, so they're sellouts to us, or they're prostitutes, or they're doing whatever else they do. These people are the moral cretins of society, and you see Jesus often with them. And we read this in Matthew 9, 10 through 13. It says, and as Jesus reclined at the table at the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and reclined with Jesus and his disciples. So it's not even Jesus in the street talking to them. He's at a table inside the house, like hanging out with them, and they're reclining at the table and shooting the breeze. Okay? That's what Jesus is doing. And then it says this. So he's offering them grace up front. Verse 11, it says, when the Pharisees saw this, so the religious people saw this, they said to his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? And so the reason they say that is this. The Pharisees cared less about grace and offering grace. The Pharisees went, we want to offer you truth up front, and then maybe we'll give you grace when you change your ways. They had it backwards. And so they're upset because they're like, Jesus, why is he offering them grace, but he hasn't offered them truth yet? And so they don't understand it. And it says, but when he heard it, so Jesus, when he heard them heard it, he said, those who are well have no need for a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. What he was saying to them is, you religious leaders, you don't think you have sin because you're so arrogant. You're so pious. You think you have everything together. You think everyone else is a mess, but you have it all together. And he's like, you guys only want to listen to me because you can't even acknowledge your own sin. And he's like, but these people, they know they're sick, so they're willing to chill with me and hang out with me because I'm showing them grace. And then he says this, so he showed grace. Then he says, for I came not to call the righteous, but who? Sinners. So now he offers truth. He's sitting with all these guys, lounging at a table, and after hanging out with them, the righteous people come over and like, they're terrible, they're terrible. Why is he eating with them? He's like, hey, these guys are sinners, they know it, and they need something. And they know they need something from me. And they're here, and they're going to get it from me, and that's why we're here. And these people, it doesn't say afterwards, get up and like run away, and like, how dare he call us that? He was able to connect with people with grace instantly, build bonds with them where when he spoke truth, didn't offend them, but made them probably, this is how I always see it in the scriptures, probably like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, what I've been doing hasn't been turning out well for me. I need a different path. And this guy actually cares for me. So you see that. Let me give you a third one. In John chapter 5, verses 1 through 15, there's another story. I'm going to give you the highlights, and I'll read you a couple of quotes from it. John chapter 5, there's a pool in Jerusalem where all the sick people and people that had different issues with their lives and all, it would like bubble. This pool would bubble from time to time. And then all the sick people would like sit around it and camp around it all day long. And they had this weird belief, superstitious belief, if you were the first one to jump in the pool when it started to bubble, you would get healed, okay? So all the sick and desperation of the city, because back then you don't have doctors, you don't have physicians, you don't have drugs to help with these medical conditions. So you have all the sick people would hang out at this pool. When it would bubble, people would start diving in. There's one guy we find out, I think he's 38 years, he's been at this pool for 38 years. Every day for 38 years he comes to the pool, but he's crippled, he can't walk, okay? He can never get in. So he's there day after day after day, and every time it bubbles, he's hoping that today is his day. He can jump in, and it heals him, and everyone else dives in, and he's in the background. 38 years of doing this, okay? And so he's there, he's defeated, he sees no hope left in life. And then it says this, Jesus shows up, and Jesus is walking amongst all these people, which people who were healthy and people who are righteous, didn't associate yourself with these people, because these are the people who are being cursed by God for the things they've done. That was their mindset. They had this stuff because they're bad people. Jesus comes, starts hanging out with them, walking the crowd, talking to people, stuff like that. And he comes up to this guy, and he has a conversation with him, and he says, Jesus told him, he says, do you want to be healed? And the guy says, yeah, I want to be healed, but I've been here for 38 years. I can't get to the water. And Jesus says to him, he says, stand up, pick up your mat, and walk. Okay? It says, instantly the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat and began to walk. So Jesus is like, you want to be healed? And the guy's like, 38 years, man. Been here. I can't get in it. Yeah, I want to be healed. Are you going to throw me in when it happens? What it is? Jesus is like, dude, get up and walk. And the dude's like, whoa, okay? And rolls up his mat and he can walk. The next thing we see, all the Pharisees, because this happens on a Saturday, within the Jewish traditions, that is Sabbath day, so you're not allowed to do any work. So they see this guy get healed by this other guy, and he stands up, and you can expect he's excited. Pharisees see this and go, the guy's carrying his mat. He's doing work. What's he doing? So they go over because they don't like seeing something miraculous happen, a big stir happening, and it wasn't involving them. So they go over, and it says Jesus kind of goes off at that point because they come over. So they start questioning this guy. Who did this to you? Who was he? Blah, blah, blah. And they pull him before their whole conference. And he's like, I don't know who he is. He's just a guy. He was hanging out with us. He's talking. He told me to get up and walk. I can walk, man. 38 years I've been there. My legs are working. I can walk. And they're like, who is he? And he's like, I don't know. So they're convinced he doesn't know who he is, so they let him out. Then we read this. So now Jesus is given grace. It says this in verse 14. But afterwards, so after he's been released from the guys questioning him, it says Jesus found him in the temple. So in the temple, there's massive crowds. Jesus finds them in the crowds, finds this guy, finds him in the temple, and he told him, now you are well. Stop sinning, or something even worse will happen to you. So Jesus goes, grabs this guy now, because the Pharisees first came in, he couldn't have the conversation. He goes back to the temple, works his way through the crowd, finds the guy, and just goes, hey, from here on out, dude, you need to clean up your life. Stop what you're doing and find a path of righteousness. You can't keep doing this or things are going to get worse. Like, you need to figure this stuff out in your life. And so you see Jesus with grace, then he gives them truth. Here's the thing. It's very easy to provide grace to other people. They love it. Okay? If you go around providing grace to everyone, no one says, don't give me grace, please condemn me. Please tell me how bad I am. No. Everybody that's a sinner, which is all of us, we love people that come to us and don't talk to us about our sin and let us be who we are and just embrace us and affirm us and tell us everything is great and don't deal with anything going on in our lives. We all love that. Everybody loves that, okay? But somewhere along the line, we've gotten scared to death of sharing truth with people. But we have to understand, if we want to actually love people the way Jesus commands us to love people, we have to start with grace, but eventually we also have to talk about truth. We have to point people away from the sin in their lives and point them towards the pursuit of righteousness in their lives. And let me just rephrase this again. When I talk about grace, grace does not mean I just go up to Chris here and I'm like, hey, Chris, good to see you, whatever. First time I met him, nice to see you. And then 2 minutes later, because I was nice to him, go, now I need to identify truth in your life. Okay? That's not how it works in our culture, because we're not Jesus. Jesus might have been able to pull that off. We can't. What it means is, the grace is, I'm going to spend the time building a relationship with you to let them know I care about you. I'm not here to beat you up. I'm not here to condemn you to anything. I'm here because I care about you as a person. And then when that is established, you now have the opportunity to present truth that people will hear and be like, okay, that person cares about me. And they're not doing it for a bad reason. They do it because they truly love me. They care for me. And then you are demonstrating love. Here's the thing. If you are loving others in any way other than the example that Jesus set before us, understand you aren't actually loving them. You might say you are, but you're not. You're doing something, but you're not loving them. This is the biggest problem in our society today. This is why we see so much of our society riddled with depression, despair, loneliness, anger, hate, violence, murder. We see all these things, and they're all symptoms of people who are lacking the experience of true, genuine, godly love in their lives, and from the people that they know, that know them, from ever giving that to them. In 2 Corinthians 5:20, it just simply says this: we, as Christians, so we are Christ's ambassadors. God is making his appeal through us when we speak for Christ, when we plead, come back to God. Live a life of righteousness. Live a different life moving forward. So my call to you this morning as followers of Jesus Christ is this: go actually love the people of this world around you with true godly love. Because when you do, lives are actually transformed for eternity. And that's how we see a world change forever. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father,